My name is Eduardo. I'm a Vue.js core team member, a freelance, and the author of Vue Router, Pinia, and Viewfire. And today I want to talk to you about elevating data fetching in Vue with data loaders. Now, data loaders is an RFC I wrote about 2 years ago, and it's extremely long. As you can see by the scroll bar on the side, this page is really long. The reason is because this is a technical document, it's a request for comment. So it contains a lot of details about the reasoning behind the motivation, the API choices, and some alternatives that are taken into consideration but haven't been implemented. Now, the reason I came up with these API is, of course, summarizing the RFC, but is way, way longer than what I could show in a talk. So my goal today is to show you how to use these API, what main problems, what are the main most common problems it is solving, and I'm going to show you how to migrate a page that is using regular data fetching in Vue to use this API and show you how much better it is. Now, the reason I created this data loader is because data fetching is really hard. It's a topic that is hard no matter the framework you're working on. And I think in Vue, we have a bit too many ways of doing data fetching. So for example, we can do client-only data fetching. So let's start with this component with a data that starts empty, right? And then we want to say, okay, so on mounted, so only on the client, we fetch some data and we put that into the reactive variable. And then we decide that, okay, but we also need to use the route. So what we do is we take into account the route params, and so we use a watcher instead, and we use immediate true, so it triggers immediately. This is now going to trigger also if we do server-side rendering, but this component doesn't work for server-side rendering for many other reasons. But at least now, if we change the route, it's gonna refetch and it's gonna refresh what is being visible. The navigation doesn't wait for it to appear, but it works. Okay, it's not bad. And then we decide that we want to display some loading state because otherwise we're just changing the URL and then we're displaying the old data, and then at some point the switch happens and we see the change. But we want to see that something is being done in the back, right? It makes us feel safer as a user. So we're gonna add some isLoading state that we set to true and false. And then we also want to handle errors. So maybe there are errors in our API calls and we want to display that there was an error rather than just go to loading and then to not loading, but not knowing why data didn't change. So all of these, as you can see, becomes really verbose, and data fetching is one of the most, if not the most common pattern that we use in applications. So it's very cumbersome to write this for every page that needs some data fetching. So that's why we have some composables that you could write. So you could use something already written by somebody else, like Unstack Query, which has a nice composable called useQuery that allows you to have some async state, and its loading state, data state, everything into 4 lines. As you can see here, we just have 4 lines and it's right there, right? What we wrote in 50 lines, we have now 4 lines. So this is much more maintainable, and we get even more because we also have cache and other features. Now, other people might be using another approach, which is Suspense. Now, Suspense is, I think, by far the most elegant in terms of the way we write the code. We just put await in there and we await the data and we put that into the data. And so we could, even if we wanted, not even use a reactive property here if it doesn't change if it doesn't ever change, but most of the time it does change. Now, the issue with Suspense is that it's too simple in a way. So it doesn't cover for issues that are present in even small applications, but you will have for sure 100% in medium to bigger applications. So we don't have any local loading state. We can display some loading state outside of the component, but not within the component. And this is problematic. The same happens for the error. There is no local error handling, so we cannot display the error here. We cannot know if we are in an error state. It happens outside of the component. So it's as if the suspense is a boundary for that data, and if we don't find, we are not able to fetch data, then that whole component is replaced. And that's where we display the error, which is not always convenient, especially when we have data that we are refreshing with new parameters like the route. Then we have cascading loading states. Now, this is inherent to how Suspense works. It means that if we have nested components, like the nested component that also fetches, I wrote that right there. If these component fetches, we still need to wait for fetch some data to finish, and then we run the other component, and then nested component that also fetches will fetch its data. We don't have parallel fetching there, so it can become very slow. And these kind of patterns can be very common in larger applications, and we don't really want to. We don't want to. And we cannot tell from these plays that the fetching should be parallel, and we shouldn't care either. So that one is a big issue in my opinion. Then we have no preloading, and so we cannot preload these fetch some data unless we do some build step pre-optimization. We don't have updates if parameter changes, so unless we use a key on the router view and we trigger a full remount of the component, but that's a bit wasteful in many occasions. And the main problem, and these two problems, is that everything depends on rendering the component, because the fetching is inside the script setup. We need to mount the component in order to fetch, and this can be very wasteful. So data loaders, they come to close the gap, all right, to bring all the benefits of using composables, but also integrate into the routing, and so not having these partial updates that we can see with anything like Suspense and Tanstack query, etc. So it can block the navigation or not if we don't want to, which means that the navigation won't happen until the data is ready, until everything has been fetched. It can change or abort the navigation if you have not found an error that wasn't expected. You can abort the navigation. It deduplicates request and data access, meaning that even though we're going to define data loaders, we don't have to use them in the page components. We can use them anywhere, and they will still only fetch once. And this is really nice. By default, everything is parallel. So if two fetches do not depend on each other, usually it means that you don't need to cross-use them or use one inside of the other. There's no nesting user. So it should be parallel by default. Usually it's parallel. And if you want to have some sequential fetching, we can use one of the loaders inside a loader and it will work. And last but not least, we delay all the data updates until all the data loaders resolve. So that means that while things are refetching, the old data will still be displayed on the page until everything has completed. So in complex applications where you have a lot of different parts that are responsible for their own small fetching, you will not have an incoherent state in your application. So that's really nice. And this is something that you cannot solve with Suspense or Tanstack query or any your custom solution, unless you really implement something similar. So in a glimpse, what is a data loader? A data loader looks like this. We have this define loader function, and then we pass to it something. And the first thing you will notice is that we are inside of another script tag. Okay, we are not inside of the script setup. Now, I know this might sound a little bit annoying, but it is necessary because we are not while rendering the component. We are exporting something, and this is very useful. So inside of that define loader, depending on the implementation, we're going to see that we have multiple possible implementations. We can, and we will fetch some data and return something. Sometimes we might have an object for configuration. It depends on the data loader that you're using. And then what we get is a composable. And so this composable can be used anywhere. And this is really powerful. And we get access to the data, loading state, error, and a function to even manually reload the data, so redo the fetch. Okay, so now it's time for some demo. Let me show you how to migrate something that is a code that is using just a watcher to loaders. So I'm going to start by launching the demo. All right. So here, what I have is a page where I'm displaying and fetching from the Art Institute of Chicago API some artwork, and I'm displaying here. I have some pagination that is going to change the page on the URL, and it should trigger a new fetch. But as you can see, it takes some time because the API I purposely made it a little bit slow, so it takes some time. So it's a little bit frustrating when you are navigating through the pages and it just takes a lot of time to go there, but you have no feedback or whatsoever. Let me show you the code. In the code, we have this artwork list that we're using in the page, and then we are watching the current page, which is, I'm using use route query, which is my custom composable, and I'm taking the page from the route. And so I'm just fetching using this function. So in order to use the data loaders, we need to install the unplugin Vue Router. I already did it here, so we won't be able to, I won't be installing it again, but it's in the package somewhere here. It's in the package.json, and we have to configure our vconfig by importing it and using it before Vue. And so by default, it will pick up every page, so every Vue component inside of the folder pages. And we need to customize all the things on the main. For example, I'm adding the data loader plugin, which is coming from here. I'm customizing the way the router is created. So I'm using auto. As you can see, I'm not providing the routes. Now, there is something important to note here is that the file-based routing and the data loaders are two separate features. They do not require each other. The reason I'm using both is to have the type safety for the routes, which is very nice, and I'm going to show you in a moment. All right, and then we also need to install some other plugins. So for example, here I'm using Pinia, which I show later, and so I need to use all the plugins. All right, so let's start by migrating these to a basic data loader. I'm going to start by using another script. This one is not going to be set up. It has to be ts, and I'm going to use the define by basic data loader. So define basic loader, as you can see here. And so the first argument that we're going to pass is the name of the route we are. So as you can see here, I have the completion, and this is going to coerce the params of the route. Here it doesn't change anything, but I'm still going to pass it. And next, what we need to pass is a function that is going to fetch the information. So I'm going to use async. I'm going to pass a function that receives the argument. What the hell happened here? And then inside of that function, I'm going to fetch it. So I'm going to call the get artwork list, return get artwork list, and I'm going to pass, for the moment, just the first page, okay, just for the example. Now, this is going to give me a composable, so I'm going to call that use artwork list. And the last step is to export. So I need to export this in order to tell the router, hey, this page is using this loader. You should load it before navigating to the page. And now I can change everything I have here. So I can delete everything here and say const equals use artwork list. And inside I'm going to have the data, and I'm going to call that artwork list. I'm checking on the side if I don't have any errors. And now if I go back to the page and I reload, I should see always the first page. So even if I go to any page, I'll still see the first page. Let's go to the next. So if I want to use the next page, what I need to do is to pass the page from the query. So here I want to use to.query page, but I also need to parse it because this is going to be a string or an array. It comes from the user, so we cannot parse it. So what I have is a function that I already wrote, which is parse query, parse page query. And we're going to pass here the query, and I'm going to say or one, I think. Maybe actually it already has a fallback probably. Yeah. And so as you can see here, I still have the current page here because I use it to change the URL. But now here they are changes, and when I navigate, I was already on the page too. Probably need a reload here. Let's see. And as you can see, when I navigate from one page to another, I have that loading bar on top. And once the loading is finished, we can see the data appear because we are waiting for the data to be ready. And so that's all it takes. Now let's do one a little bit more complicated. In the search, what you can see is that we don't have something that is fully working. We can hit a search, but it doesn't do anything. We have pagination, but it doesn't do anything. And more importantly, where are the images, right? So we're loading some placeholders and we're not loading the full resolution images. The idea is that I'm simulating a use case where I don't have all the information available in one API endpoint and I need to hit two API endpoints, one after the other. So I have some sequential loading. Let me show you the code. So I have some current page and search query, pretty much like before. And here I have the search results, and I'm searching for artwork using the query. And then when I submit the search, I change that value. And well, since it's not being watched, it doesn't re-trigger the search artwork. Now let's migrate these to a basic loader. So this time, to save a little bit of time, I'm going to the heck? I'm going to paste it here. And I'm going to explain everything in order. So I need to import the loader and I need to import all the other things. So didn't work. Now that I have that, I can remove the unmounted and the search result, oops, is going to become use our search results. Now I named it 2, but that was because I want to show you another one after this one. So what do? We do the same as before. We have the name of the route, we have the function, and here I'm ensuring that the query and the page are properly formatted so that this one is a string and this one is a number. And if query is not passed, then we can stop the navigation and say, hey, we don't want to navigate because we don't have any search, so we don't need to go there. Now, this navigation result, so we can either throw it or return it. And it will tell to the router that this loader is deciding to stop the navigation. We can pass anything that we can return in a navigation guard. So here, if I want to say, for example, query, so I could say query Goya, and then I should also paste the page, but it doesn't matter. If I try to go to an invalid query, it would just let's redo that whole section for a look. And here what I'm doing is checking if query is valid. And if it's not, I'm returning or throwing a navigation result. And this is going to tell the router to cancel the navigation, or rather to change the result of this navigation. Pretty much the same as returning a value in a navigation guard, but here we're using this class in order to let the router know if we are actually returning data or something else. And so we can pass anything that we can return in a navigation guard. And then in the end, I'm returning the promise of the actual search. So now if I go back, I have some pagination here. I should be able to search. Let me reload the page again. There we go. And we can search. We don't have all of that at all. So what I'm missing is the full resolution images. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use another loader that is going to use this loader here.